Bloom of Black Tulips, written by Andrew Mills and voiced by Laura Mills. Note from the author: this YouTube audiobook was meant to gain attention for Andrew's upcoming book, Utopia, a collection of short stories by Andrew Mills, to be self-published through Amazon. It was April of 1987, and my tulips were in early bloom again, as they have bloomed for the past 5 or 6 years, growing a few years past the breed's expected lifespan. I planted them years ago to represent the parts of myself that I disliked, that I wanted to change. Red for my wrath, yellow for my jealousy, purple for my dishonesty. But in the middle of the garden lay an oval patch of black tulips. I never planted tulips of those colors, and I didn't even know it was possible. I interpret this as a sign from God, a trait of mine He wants me to change. But what could it be? As I was looking into the tulip garden, daydreaming of what I would write in the next chapter of my book, my young daughter, Heather, arrived home from school. Seeing the early blooms of the tulips, went into the backyard to play in the tulip garden. I didn't really care if she damaged the flowers, as I planted them to represent what I hate about myself. I do love my daughter dearly, yet every time I see her, I'm reminded of my dead husband. He disappeared while I was pregnant with Heather, and perhaps because of how quickly the search was closed, they never found him alive or his body, and he was declared dead in absentia last year. No one was ever charged with his murder, but deep down, I do know he was the victim of a murder. My grief has mostly subsided, and I do intend to remarry, but it's been a struggle finding a man who loves me as much as my deceased husband did. As I finished cooking, I called my daughter back inside for supper, and she obediently returned. Like a good Christian, she looked at what she had and not what she didn't, and prayed before her meal. And after the meal, she put her dishes in the sink unprompted. Yet unease grew in me. She did what she should do, so why? After dinner, she went to the indoor playroom and took 2 of her dolls out of the toy box, where I left her alone to work on my writing. Yet I overheard a part of a comment she made while playing with her dolls. Tulips, but not as beautiful as you. I figured she probably still had tulips on her mind from playing outside in the garden. I looked at the clock and saw it was time to put her to bed, so I sent her to her room, and she brought a bedtime story with her upstairs. It was old enough that my parents read it to me as a bedtime story before I could read, but Heather enjoyed it nonetheless, and not long after she fell asleep, I went to bed myself. The next few days seemed uninteresting, just repeating the schedule of the first day, until I noticed something interesting, yet I'm not sure if it's just me or not. Heather seems to be spending more time in the patch of black tulips, and that the other tulips seem to be damaged by her playing in them, but not the black tulips. But maybe this is a sign I should think about what those black tulips mean. I think it might be one of the 7 deadly sins. Now, to figure out which one it is. I already have tulips to wrath, so that's not it. I remain celibate except when trying to get pregnant, so it's not lust. I typically think of what I have before what I don't have, so it's not greed or envy. I don't really think it's possible to be lazy as a single mother, so not sloth. In the past, gluttony could be it, but I've since been able to control my appetite and have gotten quite a bit thinner. Yet the tulips still bloom black, so that leaves my pride. But I view pride as the inability to admit oneself was wrong. Yet I know my flaws, and albeit usually fruitlessly, I try to change them. Could it be something else? Perhaps cowardice? When my daughter came back in for dinner, she prayed before eating again, yet there was clear contempt in the tone of her voice. I scolded her for her obvious contempt towards God, yet she denied any contempt to God or anyone else. I didn't have the energy to argue with her, so I let her play in the playroom after she put her dishes in the sink, while I went back to the office to write. Nearly at the mark of finishing a chapter, I overheard Heather saying, "Tulips, as beautiful as you." And I continued to write until it was time to put her to bed. The next day was Saturday, and my tulips were in almost full bloom. I do not like Saturdays, as my daughter nearly spends the entire day outside, so I have to focus on watching her instead of my writing. I do have high, visually obstructing fences in my backyard, but I still fear she's not safe outside if she doesn't have me or another adult I trust watching her. I noticed her pick a black tulip and put it in her pocket that morning. The weather was nice that day, so when it came to prepare lunch, I asked her if she wanted to go to the park and have a picnic. To which she asked, "Why not have it in the backyard where we can see the tulips?" To which I said, "Fair enough, the tulips are pretty." I went back inside and got the picnic mat, basket, and made sandwiches and other food suitable for a picnic. I brought the mat and basket outside, laid the picnic mat on a patch of grass near the garden, and called Heather over to eat. Before eating, she took the black tulip out of her pocket and sniffed it, then laid it down on the mat. Out of the basket, she took a sandwich, an apple, and a juice box. While she was eating, she barely looked at me or her food, mostly pointing her eyes at the garden. After lunch, my daughter continued to play in the tulip garden, occasionally picking a black tulip and putting it in her pocket. It didn't feel that long until I had to call Heather back inside for dinner, and before she ate, she gave me the tulips she picked, every one of them black. I thanked her and put the flowers in a vase, but while I was distracted, she started eating her supper without praying. I'd allow that for lunch and breakfast, but dinner is a special meal, and I asked her to pray, but she just continued eating without saying a word, and when she was finished, she walked to her playroom without putting her dishes in the sink. I decided to just go with the flow and work on writing, since I don't get much time to write on Saturdays. As I went to write, I again overheard something from my daughter playing. It was her saying, "Tulips, even more beautiful than you." But while actually writing, I struggled to write a single additional word down. I figured I might have needed some sleep, so I put Heather to bed a little earlier than usual. In the morning when I awoke, I looked out the bedroom window to see Heather digging in the patch of black tulips, now in full bloom. I do not know how long she had been digging for, but she had gotten decently deep into the ground and she was covered in dirt and mud. I ran down outside and shouted at her, "What the hell are you doing?" I don't think that was appropriate language for her age, but I was angry and not quite thinking clearly. She answered, "I'm trying to find the source of these black tulips." To which I commanded, "Well, it's Sunday. That's church day. Take a bath and get your church clothes on." To which she defiantly proclaimed, "The hollow promises of faith will never sate my curiosity." I doubt she knew what all of those words meant, at least this context, yet the sentence was perfectly coherent. I told her, "You won't find an obvious source of black tulips there. God grew them for me." She turned her head to face me and asked, "But do you truly know that, Mother?" I feared I would not be able to convince her to stop digging in the tulip patch, so I said to her, "It's clear I can't convince you otherwise, so I'll bring you a shovel. That'll surely be faster and easier than digging with your hands." I went to the tool shed and picked out a shovel that was clearly too large for Heather to easily use. But I was not thinking about the size of the shovel at that time, merely the strength. I headed out back to my daughter, and I can't say what I did with the shovel, but I can tell you no one can know why the tulips were growing black. Not her, not you, not anyone. Just know I dearly love and always will dearly love my daughter, Heather, and my deceased husband, Robert.